We have what I would personally call a white collar worker recession. Or
Mhm.
at least a very sluggish economy.
What should people be doing right now during the application interview process to negotiate?
As of right now, at the end of June, we are seeing about 12 states, plus Washington, D.C., and a few other municipalities, have passed pay transparency legislation, and that's effective in 9 states.
It's time to pivot in your confidence, career, and compensation with the 5 Minute Career Hack podcast every Monday and Thursday. Now, get ready for a special interview curated just for you. Welcome back to the 5 Minute Career Hack, where we are no fluff, all action, and get straight to the hacks you need to skyrocket your career. I'm Jamila Brown, your host for today, and we're breaking down barriers with Amy Stewart from PayScale. We're diving into salaries, the depth of degree requirements, and why compensation is the battlefield for 2024. If you're tired of feeling undervalued, underpaid, or stuck, this is the episode. This is your ticket out. Amy's got the inside scoop on how you can turn those trends or the current trends into your personal advantage. So if you're ready to disrupt your career in the best way possible, stay tuned. And hey, before you get lost in all these incredible hacks, hit that subscribe button or follow button and join our community of career hackers. Now let's get started. Welcome to the podcast, Amy. It's so good to have you here. How are you doing today?
I am doing great. Thank you so much for having me.
Feel free to give a little bit of your background as we get started, but we really want to dive into understanding what pay transparency actually is. I don't want there to be any confusion for the audience around what pay transparency is, and I know it can vary from state to state as there's legislation and all kinds of stuff going on. But what's the most simplest way you could explain pay transparency to the audience?
Thank you so much. Well, like you mentioned, I work for PayScale. My name is Amy Stewart. I am the Associate Director of Content, and I write a lot of our research reports. And pay transparency has definitely been a big topic in the last couple of years. Like you mentioned, it is new legislation that rolled out, I want to say beginning in 2021, and has been expanding over the past couple of years to multiple states. So, in terms of what is it, I would have actually described it differently before the legislation came out, and it has been evolving with the legislation. So, in the simplest way possible, I would say today, pay transparency is publishing the pay range in the job advertisement. So, what is this job worth? What is the hourly pay, or what is the pay range, with the min and max advertised within the job posting, so that before you even applied for that job as a candidate, you know it's worth your while.
Now you have me curious. How would you have defined it before all of the legislation? You sparked my interest right away as soon as you said that. How would you have defined it before? Just so we can dispel maybe some myths if they're out there.
I think this probably impacts employers more than it does job seekers, but I think before it was conflated with pay communications. So it was the tools and techniques that organizations use to explain pay, or to train managers on how to explain pay to employees. And organizations would describe their transparency on a level of 1 to 5, from very opaque to very transparent. But with the legislation, everyone is now being pushed towards the very transparent end of that spectrum. And so that is causing a lot of organizations to have to hop in order to get their processes and practices up to speed, so that they can do that with confidence.
Okay, so we got a really clear understanding of what pay transparency is. In the United States, talking specifically, how far along, if you could attach a percentage to it, if you don't know the exact percentage, what's the percentage of states that have now adopted pay transparency and it's a legal requirement for organizations?
I've heard so many different answers, but how long should my resume be? Listen, a one-page resume is ideal for candidates with less than 10 years experience. Now, if you have more experience, a two-page resume is absolutely acceptable. There's so many steps to creating a resume story that converts to getting your dream job. Sign up now for 5 Minute Career Hacks resume hacking services and let us help you right now. You even get a 1-hour consultation with our team.
So that's a tough one to answer in one number, but I will try.
Yeah,
So
just a
as
guesstimate.
as of right now, at the end of June, we are seeing about 12 states, plus Washington, D.C., and a few other municipalities, have passed pay transparency legislation. And that's effective in 9 states, including Washington, D.C. So the way the legislation works is you draft a bill, the bill goes through a long process, eventually goes to the governor of that state to sign, and then there's an effective date after the bill is signed where those legal requirements take effect. So 9 states it's effective. Those include California, Colorado, Connecticut, Hawaii, Maryland in October, Nevada, New York State, Ohio, Rhode Island, and Washington State, and Washington, D.C. as of this month.
Okay.
Illinois will be added in 2025, and Vermont in July of 2025. And then there are another 6 states where legislation has been proposed: Maine, Massachusetts, Missouri, Minnesota in 2025, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania. So that was tough for you to follow. It's a total of
No.
18 states, representing 36% of states in the US. But the number of employees that impacts is 1 in 4 right now and 1 in 3 in 2025, because some states are more populated than others. So when you throw in the more populated states, you have a better impact, or a bigger impact, on the population at large.
At large. And based upon the states that you mentioned, because I'm a Southerner, born and raised, I heard a lot of West Coast, East Coast, North states. Is there something to that, or what would you say there?
Yeah, I mean, these are better questions probably for politicians than they are
Right.
for me. But at a broad level, California tends to lead the way on progressive
Yeah.
legislation, and coastal states tend to lead the way on progressive legislation. Colorado being kind of an outlier in this case. So I think typically you see in those coastal regions where there are more bigger cities and heavier populations and more people living more densely together, you have to have more equitable laws and regulations for things because people have to get along. So those states tend to be the leaders, and the middle states and southern states tend to be the laggers when it comes to progressive legislation.
Hey, so not a politician, but I think you answered that great. It's a great way to look at it. And I don't know if I thought about population density and the proximity of everyone, and then that pushing things,
Yep.
forward versus in some southern states, we have concentrate. I'll take Louisiana as an example. We have concentrations like of
Yep.
density, but they're sporadic throughout the state, and then you'll have these small towns everywhere, and then overall I think that absolutely plays a part in it.
Yep.
So in coastal, which is very interesting, you're making me think as you answered that question. So I can see myself deep diving into that just a little bit more. Not even on the political side, but just understanding, because I covered California or the Pacific Northwest as a whole for a couple years when I worked for Walmart US, and I lived out in Orange County. And it's very true when I think about one thing in particular. This was, I think, in 2010, 11, was the progressive nature in which they started putting calories on the menu first
Yep.
in California. And that was, a while back. And that wasn't something that was happening really anywhere else in the US at the time. And now it's just a norm. Right. In 2024, that's the normal. You expect to see that on every menu, but they were first a long time ago. Right. So I think that's so interesting.
Yeah, we could get into the weeds a little bit about whether or not putting calories on menus has the intended effect that they that they wanted. And pay transparency might be similar. There's an intended effect, and the intended effect is more equity for everyone. That women, minorities, people who have been historically disadvantaged will be able to get higher paying jobs when they can see what those jobs actually pay and know that they can negotiate for the pay that they deserve. Whether that actually ends up happening as a result of pay transparency is yet to be seen.
Right. There's so many unknowns when you're trying to chart a course that hasn't been walked before. So I think I love the disclaimer that you put there, and the analogy using the calories, because I don't know if it solved anything in the South, for sure. Not the way we still eat out here, but it very well could have solved some things in other places. So shifting gears just a tinge, and then I think we kind of pull this together in one larger conversation around salary negotiations. But how are you seeing, and we've talked about this on an incredible series that you did earlier this year that I believe is still releasing parts, if I'm not mistaken. But how's the job market changed specific to job requirements? What are you seeing from a macro trend standpoint?
Yes. So the job market, I think, is actually a separate question from job requirements, but I think I'll answer both of those because they're both interesting questions. So what we have happening in the job market right now is really interesting. We have what I would personally call a white collar worker recession.
Mm.
Or at least a very sluggish economy. So if you work a desk job, or your job does require a college degree, or where a college degree is more preferred, and we'll get to the requirement side of that later because it's a separate issue. But for white collar workers, knowledge workers, it is slow right now. I think
Mm.
blue collar workers have more opportunity. If you are in a trade, if you are working a lower wage job, there's quite a lot of opportunity out there. But for white collar workers, the last, I would say, year and a half, going on 2 years, has been sluggish, and it does not look to be picking up soon. I'm hoping to see that change in the latter half of this year, but it is still to be determined. And the primary reason for this is rising interest rates. So after COVID, we had runaway wage growth and runaway inflation, which you can debate whether those are related or not. I think there's arguments to be made both ways. But the high inflation, in order to tame that, they had to increase borrowing costs, because that makes it harder for people to um, overspend and continue to have that inflation go up. So they're tapping down the ease with which money can be borrowed by making it more expensive to do so. And over time, that is supposed to tame inflation and get it back below 2%. It is not yet there. It is close. So if you hear people saying inflation is sky high right now, it's not. It's the inflation is not sky high. The prices are higher as a result of past high inflation. So we have not seen deflation. So things are more expensive, but inflation is down. However, when interest rates are high, it makes it harder for businesses to borrow as well as people. And it creates this kind of trepidation in the marketplace where we have a lot of speculation and economists saying these high interest rates are unsustainable. A recession is coming soon. Look at the inverted yield curve and the kinds of things that investment bankers talk about. And that makes it hard for companies to invest in growth because they think any moment it's all going to collapse under us, and they don't want to hire a bunch of people and then have to fire all those people or lay off all those people if the economy takes a turn. So there's a lot of reticence in the market to hire right now, which is making it difficult for especially knowledge workers to find positions in this current market. And I would add that AI is not helping. I wouldn't say it's hurting as much as the kind of mythology has inflated, but it definitely is creating some challenges when it comes to the ease of applications, and the number of people that are applying for jobs and finding it just really difficult to get a foot in the door.
I think that's an incredible download of the economy, inflation, spending, and then ultimately, this other caveat called AI. And I do believe AI will create more jobs. They'll just be different types of jobs. And I think there's a lag time from us using that new technology or using it in our job in a different way, or taking a job away, the creation of the new job, and then the person being skilled enough in that role to take this new role that now AI has created. I think there's just like this bubble in the middle, if that makes sense, between where we are now and what AI will do in the future, and someone getting that new AI job. In the middle of all that is a bubble that I think creates job loss, if that makes sense. That's my thoughts on it. That's my theory. What's your thoughts on that? And we're not going to go deep into the AI hole. I promise you we won't.
It's definitely a rabbit trail, and I don't know how qualified I am to talk about it. I am concerned about society at large with the introduction of AI, not for the reason that you mentioned. I think skilled workers, creative workers, knowledgeable workers will go through a transition,
Yeah.
like you talked about. I am more worried about the low skilled opportunities that might stop existing, and what that will do to our society at large when you look at opportunity in aggregate, and the kind of existential dread that comes from not being able to find work as easily as you could before, and how people get educated and what kinds of jobs are available. So I think that there is some niggling concerns around that for me. It may or may not affect me in my lifetime, but I don't live here just for me. I'm thinking about the future
Mm.
generations, those that come after us, and I do have some concerns around that. But certainly a rabbit trail for this conversation, and I do feel like there's much to be seen on that front. So we may see some regulation and some other things happen that could improve that outlook.
Awesome. Well, your take is timestamped now and forever out in the atmosphere, and we'll be able to pull this out as social receipts for you if you are absolutely right, if this conversation takes hold in the future. So, thank you for sharing your thoughts on that. And then to kind of dive back more into, uh, I know we talked a little bit about the job market and why people are facing what they're facing and what's happening. And then there's this new, I don't know if it's a renaissance or evolution of job requirements. And I'd love to get your take on why you think things have changed from a job requirement standpoint, and what on the employer side, what are they seeing, and maybe why they're adjusting.
Yeah, this is a fascinating topic, and we have a report that has not come out yet, but is going to come out in a few weeks on the impact of college degrees on compensation. So stay tuned for that. But we release our college ROI report, and we have this new report, like a companion report coming out related to that. So at a high level, I can tell you college still is worth investing in if you are strategic about the education that you get and the kind of degree that you are or career that you are pursuing, where that college degree is required. What has changed, and this has been going on for decades, it's not just new this year, is that there are many alternative paths to learning today that didn't exist in decades prior. I would say pre-internet. The internet has revolutionized how people learn, and that has competed with universities, because it used to be that if you wanted to learn from outside of your college education, you could go to the library and buy a bunch of books and have the self-discipline to maybe teach yourself things, but not a lot of people did that. Or you had to go to a center of knowledge like a university and sign up for a program and graduate from that program in order to improve your overall acuity in what it is that you are looking to do. And the internet has completely overhauled that. So there are many ways that people can get high paying jobs today that they couldn't before. And at the same time, there was this surge in that, I would say around the 1980s, 1990s, to push everyone into college, whether they were suited for it or not, whether they wanted it or not. There was this urge to educate everyone, and I'm not going to say that's bad, because I do see that there are a lot of positive civic reasons for doing that. But I think that the result on the employment side is that we had a glutted market of college graduates and not enough jobs for those people that actually required college degrees. See, a lot of people going and getting degrees in philosophy and then going and working retail as a store manager. And the question is, do you need a degree to do that? So there's some debate around that. So are requirements changing? Yes, they are. According to our compensation best practices report, which is an annual report that we produce every year at PayScale, that is aimed at employers, so not job seekers like yourselves, but people who manage your pay within the organization. And we ask about, do you require a college degree in your job descriptions to consider applicants with the necessary, or do you remove those requirements to consider applicants with necessary skills and experience? And 34%, that's over a third, of organizations have removed college degree requirements for positions where they're really not necessary. And that number is going up over time, because there are so many jobs today that really don't require a
Right.
college degree, where you can learn those skills through alternative routes. 16% of organizations do still say they compensate more for a bachelor's degree, and a different number for an associate and a post-bachelor degree. But it really depends on the job. And what organizations have to do is to be more judicious about their job evaluation, to really think through, does this job require a college degree or doesn't it? If it does, do we compensate more for that? If it's just preferred, do we compensate more for
Mm,
that? How do we do that consistently in a way that is equitable? Because what you don't want is to have demotivated employees in the organization where you have two people doing the same job with the same amount of responsibility, and one person gets paid more than the other because they have a college degree, or it's not really relevant to the specific job that they're doing. So that is what is happening kind of in the zeitgeist of what the employers are doing, and that impacts job seekers. It impacts you, especially if you're young, if you're considering an education. And again, I am not anti-college. I'm a previous former teacher, and I think everyone learns something from going through the process of going to school. But you do have to be strategic about it. Just getting any degree and getting any job and thinking this is going to increase my pay may or may not be true in the future. So it's really about what are the skills that you are bringing to the table? What is it that you are able to do that makes you competitive in the marketplace compared to someone else? So that combination of experience, abilities, and education are what you need to be competitive in the marketplace. Again, there's always going to be some jobs that require a college degree. You cannot be a doctor if you do not have
right.
if you are not educated. Registered nurses have to get licensed. Like there are jobs that require degrees, and always will. But you do have to be strategic about what it is you are learning and why you are learning it. What kind of jobs have preferences for the type of work that you're doing, and really think about what it is you want to do in the long term.
I think that's every point that you shared there is very interesting, and I'm gonna just dissect a couple and share my experience in retail, right? So that's where the bulk of my career was spent, from probably my early 20s into my to the finish of my career in my, I guess, early 40s. And there, when I worked for Walmart US, specifically in operations, it was a badge of honor to come to Walmart without a degree, work in operations, make $250,000 a year and have a high school diploma at best. And I think about, and this is probably in 2006 ish. And when I think about that, I also think about the amount of training and development that was available at Walmart as well, which, in hindsight, was probably likened to getting a degree on the job. While you're working, you're being trained in leadership, you're being trained in compliance, you're being trained in marketing, you're being trained in branding, you're being trained in HR functions, you name it, safety, OSHA, you name it. There's just this laundry list of things that you're being trained to do, and certifications that you're also getting on the job real time. You're being trained in labor relations. The list is very extensive. I could probably spend another 10 minutes rattling off all the things that I learned during that time, that I didn't learn in college. Let me make that note. And I'm pro college for a few reasons, but I also believe it's important, like you mentioned, to understand what you're actually trying to accomplish and is it necessary, and being very specific about choosing what you're learning to do. Now, what I would love to ask you, though, is the speed at which we have access to information and the way we consume at this point. The argument or that I would bring that would be against college is that speed of information. And so if I'm learning, and I know textbooks are online too, but if I'm learning, from a proverbial textbook, how quickly is that information out of date?
Well, I mean, I think the way that we consume and the way that we acquire and distribute information will change with technology over time. What the universities offer that you can't get from a library is that networked experience of experts.
Yeah,
So being in a classroom with an expert with industry experience, like you can learn a lot
absolutely.
from being in a classroom with other people, being surrounded by people who may come from a different background than you're used to, who may come in with different assumptions. That challenges a lot of young people, and it challenges them in a good way. So I do think that universities are valuable. But when you're talking about job skills, the information that you're learning at college may or may not be relevant to a specific job that you are trying to get. So, anyway, in my ideal world, the civic education, the humanities education that you get in college would be free to everyone. And the skilled training programs would be what you pay for on top of that, that relate to your, compensation capacity as a worker in the world. But I am not able, I'm not on a platform today to try to like push the desire of that. But I do think that there is a civic value for university, just in understanding our history as a nation, the humanities, the exposure to different kinds of thinking, different ways of thinking, and critical thinking,
Yeah.
in specification. You don't get that from a textbook. You can, but you get it much better when you are challenged in a classroom with other voices. So I think that is a still a valuable experience that humanity needs and that
Mhm.
society needs. But when we're talking about how much do I get paid, that's really going to be skills based. And I think there are alternative ways that we will be teaching people skills in the future.
And that's a perfect segue to what should individuals be doing right now based upon pay transparency, based upon the job market, and ultimately job requirements. What should people be doing right now during the application interview process to negotiate? Like, what are some things, like, if you could give somebody one or two things that they should absolutely be doing right now to position themselves to get fair, equitable pay for themselves, not just a statistic or a grouping, but for themselves based upon what they're able to do. What would be those one or two things that you would give as a tip or advice?
Well, I definitely think we could have a very long conversation about salary negotiation. But I will also say there are a lot of resources out there about salary negotiation, and it's not really that complex of a topic. So I would encourage everyone to do a couple of things. One, do some research. Know what the job that you are wanting to have, whether it's a current job that you're in and you're looking for a different job, a different same title but different position somewhere else, or if you're looking to ratchet up the career ladder, know what that job is worth. And there's a couple of different ways to do that. We talk about pay transparency. So you can go on job boards today. You can go to ZipRecruiter, LinkedIn, Monster, whatever your poison is, and go and find the pay range for the job that you are looking into. Collect a few of those, because they're not going to be the same across all organizations. But go start looking at what that job makes, that specific job title. If you can get it within the company size and the general location where you are, those can be factors that can impact the pay. So you want to make sure that you're looking at a variety of different ways that those roles are. Being advertised. And then you can also take a survey. So PayScale offers a fairly infamous online salary survey. You can take that survey. It will spit out the pay range for that job based on other people who have filled out that survey recently. If your job is not very common, you may not get a response. But if you have a job that we have enough profiles in the system to provide you with some of that basic information, you will get something spit out. Have those two things available. Some jobs you can also find in government websites. You can ask people, ask people who have that job what they make. People are much more likely today to share that information than they were even a few years ago. So that is a way of finding that information. Gather some evidence. The second thing that you want to do is to have a conversation with your manager if you are trying to get a pay increase at your current job. So this looks different if you're looking at a job offer versus trying to increase your pay at a current job. If it's a job offer, you have the most power at the time that you receive an offer. So when they say, "Hey, we've looked at all the candidates and we like you the best," that is the time to ask for more in whatever capacity. The worst thing that will happen is they will say no. Very, very rarely are people told the job offer is rescinded because you tried to negotiate for higher pay. I'm not saying it never happens, but like I've never personally, anecdotally heard of that happening.
Never. I've never
So
heard of it either. So, yep.
just like you never say never, but like I
But
don't, I don't think that's common. Typically you'll get respect for asking because your hiring manager is going to say, "Oh, this person has ambition. They know what they want. They have gumption." And if you're asking for unreasonable things, they'll just level with you on what is actually reasonable. But if you are in your current position and you're like, I need to make more money for whatever reason. That situation looks different. You have less power in that situation, but it is still a similar situation. I think a lot of people assume that they're going to offend their manager if they ask for more money, or that they need to be just like content with what they have and wait for their manager to come to them and offer them pay out of the blue. And that's just, I'm not saying that doesn't happen, but it doesn't happen as often as I think people want or expect it to. There are a lot of companies that don't even have a compensation strategy, don't even have processes for giving pay increases, especially smaller companies, not the Walmarts of the world, but like little organizations, little startups and things. I've worked at companies where there was like no process for that. So you do have to self advocate in a lot of situations. And this is actually a good time to ask, because a lot of organizations, if their fiscal year starts in January, and not all companies do, but if their fiscal year starts in January, they've just gone through an annual process of giving everyone a pay increase in that Q1, Q2 timeframe. And now they're waiting to see who is dissatisfied and decide and wants to leave the organization because they didn't get enough pay. So this could be the time to say, hey, Mr. or Miss Manager, I am looking, to increase my earning potential in my current position. I'd love to have a conversation about my current salary and my growth opportunities within the company. Now, you want to do this in a positive way. So you don't want to put your manager on edge. You don't want to be hostile. It should be a collaboration between you and your manager, where you are communicating to them that you love your job, you're excited to work there, you're happy with your team and your projects, but you just want to have a conversation about what your opportunities are to grow with the company. And then you've got to give your manager some time, because it is very common for your manager to actually have no idea how much you are currently paid, not remember your salary history, not know what the policy is for the company. They have to go talk to HR or talk to their boss or go figure out those
Absolutely.
processes on the side. So they're going to go do that quietly, and then they're going to set a meeting with you in a week, 2 weeks, or however long it takes them. And then they'll have a conversation where they either offer you a raise, or where you have a further discussion about it. And then you do a negotiation process, and you come to terms. I have seen people get 9%, 15%, 12%, 3%, all over the board through this process. So it is something that you can do. And now is a decent time to do it, because salary budget season starts right around July. So organizations start to figure out, how much do we have as a company to give in the upcoming year? And they start doing that research process, the year-long process that organizations go through. But now is a time where managers can sometimes, if it's warranted, increase pay for employees that they don't want to lose. Especially if those employees bring evidence that they are underpaid, or they can show that they are deserving of a pay increase that's higher than the one they got for the year. So it is worth asking. It's not necessarily worth asking every year, but it is worth asking if you haven't asked for a while, and especially if you have evidence that you are being paid either below the median, or in worst case scenario, below the pay range entirely. Then you really need to ask, because that organization is technically on shaky ground from a legal standpoint. If you are being paid below the pay range that may have been advertised elsewhere as part of pay transparency.
Now, the one thing I wish I had done before you started sharing that information was tell the audience to grab their notepad. But you can always rewind and hit the little 15-second button or like 100 times to catch everything that Amy just shared. And there was a lot of information that I want to call attention to around the process and the cycle that an organization goes through. Understanding that, along with understanding that your boss probably doesn't remember how much you make, or even everything that you've done in your role that you believe deserves the promotion. It's your responsibility to advocate for yourself, but also understand that cycle so that you're making your pitch for yourself at the absolute optimal time to get the best result. If you go in at the wrong time and we're cutting because we have to hit a number for our earnings report, or if it's a publicly traded company, they're not even going to take that information. Your boss is not even taking that information to HR at that point, because they've probably just been told in a meeting that they can't spend money on anything. Don't even sneeze. We're not buying Kleenex this quarter, right? That type of thing could be happening. So just want to call attention, if you're rewinding this, to understanding the cycle that a business and an organization is going through, and whether they're publicly traded or not, they have a planning cycle for their budget. that will include the HR line item for human resources. So make sure that you're tapped into that as you get ready to make your pitch for yourself. And then ultimately understand that your boss is not like that in tune with what you have going on. They want you to get the job done, don't get me wrong, but they're not that in tune, and don't expect them to know it, and don't be offended that they may or may not know. Don't take it as like they don't care about me. That's just not the case. So don't take it personal. So I thought that was incredible advice. And as we begin to wrap up the podcast, I want to just ask what your final 5 words for the audience would be. If you have 5 words that you felt like, man, based upon the research, the insights, the content that I've created over my illustrious career at PayScale, and everything you've learned, everyone you've interacted with thousands of organizations at this point, I'm sure, if not more. And you're just a repository of just data and information about how we even got to this point in the workplace, to be honest. And I'd love for you to leave the audience with like 5 words. If they don't remember anything else that we've talked about, if they remember this, it would absolutely help them in their professional journey. What would those 5 words be for you?
I would say, a few more than 5. I would say, think carefully about what you want, research how to get there, and know what you're worth. Those are 3 lines of advice. So, that planning, the determination, the planning, the research, and the confidence and courage. So that's 5 words.
Yeah.
Determination, planning, confidence, knowledge, and courage.
Oh, that's good. Because it brings you, it is a cycle too, right? In and of itself. Maybe with confidence kind of sitting underneath it the entire time, but I love that. That's great advice for the audience. Thank you so much for spending this time with our audience today. I know that this will be an invaluable contextual conversation that will live on for some time beyond us even probably doing this podcast. It'll live out in the world and help individuals. It wasn't so time stamped about what we're actually doing right now. I think there were so many things, especially around the cycles for business and how the job market, this won't be the last time we're facing an inflation issue, if that makes sense. And so that understanding, I think, is going to benefit so many people beyond our time, probably even on this earth. So I appreciate you sharing with the audience today. I love the work that you're doing at PayScale, and it's just been a pleasure to partner with you on so many projects at this point. So I appreciate you, and thanks for being on the podcast today.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right. And as I always end every podcast, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, and I love you, and I'll talk to you soon. I truly hope you enjoyed this episode as much as we enjoyed doing it for you. However, it doesn't have to end there. Come on over to our Facebook group community right now for free. You're going to get exclusive content that we weren't able to include in this episode as well as past episodes. We've got challenges, we've got research, we've got lives, you name it, all for you in bite-sized chunks so that you can continue this development journey. Go ahead, click the link right now in the description show notes, and we'll see you there.